Donald Trump called Vladimir Putin a paper tiger again this week. Europe says it's considering turning over frozen Russian assets to Ukraine. Ukrainian drones have intensified attacks on Russian oil refineries. Everyone seems to be trying to get under Putin's skin. Why? And what should you be doing with your money right now? Trump, spurned by Putin, appears to have soured on everything Russian lately. He says Putin has gone crazy. About the Ukraine war, he says it should have taken a real military power less than a week to win. He says the Russian economy is in big trouble. It was only 6 weeks ago when Trump said that he had a great relationship with Putin. So why the sudden U-turn? Surely Trump does not think that insulting Russia will help persuade Putin to stop the war. A plausible explanation is that Trump has concluded that the only way to bring Putin to the negotiating table is to tip the balance of the war. My gut says that Trump is preparing the political space to back Ukraine more vigorously. My hypothesis is consistent with Trump's declaration last week that Kiev can win back all of his territory, and maybe even go further than that. It is also consistent with the statement from both Keith Kellogg, Trump's special envoy to Ukraine, and J.D. Vance last week that Trump is considering sending the Tomahawk missiles capable of striking deep in Russia, to Ukraine. Trump likes winners. If he's going to back any side in this war, we can assume it will be the winning side. But is it so obvious that Russia is going to lose this war? Alexander Syrsky, the commander-in-chief of the Armed Forces for Ukraine, said last week that Russia's 2025 summer offensive has failed to achieve its main goals. Is this true? What do we know about Russia's objectives in the offensive? If the main goal of the offensive is to increase Russia's control of the 4 Ukrainian regions that Russia has annexed, the numbers suggest it's been a great success. According to the Ukrainian monitoring group Deep State, between May and September, Ukrainian territory under Russian control increased by 2,291 square meters, compared to an increase of just 1,371 square meters during the same period in 2024. This represents a 66% year-on-year increase. How much did it cost the Russians to achieve this result? What were the Russian casualties in the summer of 2025 compared to the summer of 2024? Mediazona is the only source that I'm aware of that has created a consistent time series of Russian war dead since the start of the war. It does this by compiling a name list of the Russian military dead from publicly available data, augmented by data from the Russian National Probate Registry. The Mediazona data shows a big increase in Russian war dead in 2024 compared to 2023. But their data so far are showing a sharp drop in 2025. It is possible that this is because of incomplete data for the most recent months. But even if we were to ignore the data for the past 4 months and just compare the numbers for May 2025 with those from May 2024, it shows a steep decline from an average 800 dead a week last year to about 200 dead a week this year. War is a foggy business, but the picture painted by publicly available data is not one of Russian failure, but success so far in 2025. But what about the fact that the pace of Russian territorial advance in Ukraine slowed significantly in September, with Russian forces seizing 44% less land compared to August? If the goal of the summer offensive is to overcome Ukrainian strongholds around Pokrovsk, Kupiansk, Kostyevka, and Seversk, Russian troops have achieved partial encirclement of these cities. And unlike in the battles of Bakhmut and Avdiivka, where frontal Russian assault resulted in heavy Russian casualties, the current Russian operation relies more on precision strikes, small unit maneuvers, and cutting off Ukrainian supplies. The new Russian strategy is designed to stretch out and wear down Ukrainian defense before going in for the kill. This is also why the Russians have stretched the front line in the battlefield to nearly 1,250 kilometers, 200 kilometers more than last year. It seems to me that this is why the speed of the Russian advance has slowed since the start of September. What is very clear is that the Russians are fighting a positioning war in late 2025, a strategy that leverages their numerical superiority while preserving maximum operational flexibility. We won't know the results for another 6 to 8 weeks, but the strategy makes sense if you ask me, especially given Trump's unpredictability. But what about the Russian economy that Trump says is in big trouble? There's no doubt that 4 years into the war has become a big drag on the Russian economy. The IMF is forecasting the Russian economy to grow just 1% this year, down from 3.8% in 2024. This reflects lower oil price and increasingly strained public finances, as well as the persistent drain in manpower caused by the war. Industrial production has slowed to a trickle this year, and car sales are down more than 20%. There's no doubt that consumer sentiment is deteriorating. The Unbound Russian survey shows that discretionary spending in August was lower than the previous 2 years. Our survey also shows that financial optimism is at the lowest level in 3 years. Don't get me wrong, the fact that the Russian economy is slowing does not mean that Russia will soon run out of means to continue the war. Both debt to GDP ratio and the unemployment rate remain very low. And the relative stability of the ruble means the economy is adjusting quickly to the drop in oil price. What it does mean, though, is that Putin cannot afford to keep the war going indefinitely. Our survey shows a recent slide in public's approval of his handling of the conflict. Putin has to find a way to end the war soon. Putin wants to end the war soon, but on his terms. The only way to do it is by achieving a decisive blow to Ukraine. His summer offensive is designed to do exactly this. But Zelensky understands this only too well. This is why he has thrown everything into the Eastern Front to prevent a Russian breakthrough. More importantly, he's doing everything possible to drag NATO into the conflict. At the same time Zelensky is talking up Ukraine's gains in the war, he's warning that Russia is about to invade another European country. Zelensky knows that if he can only slow down the Russian advance, then he'll have the whole of winter to regroup and rearm. Everything points to an escalation in the weeks ahead. This is also borne out by the Unbound survey that shows a rising share of both of our respondents in Russia and Ukraine expecting an escalation in the war over the next few weeks. The Russian-Ukraine war is entering its most critical phase. The Russia hawks in Washington know this, and this is probably why the timing for the talk of Tomahawk missiles for Ukraine. Rising geopolitical risk has been accompanied by the outperformance of gold against the dollar, the euro, and even Bitcoin since August. I'm kicking myself for not being long gold, but I'm short the euro against the dollar. A further escalation of the conflict will be a headwind for both the euro as well as the European markets. Thank you for listening.